Legends, what's going on? I hope all is well. I hope you all are rocking, having an incredible week. I hope you all are staying safe out there. Welcome back to another Excelsius live demo. I'm super excited to jump into today's live demo. We're going to be doing something a little bit different than we normally do. Of course, we're going to be taking a look at Excelsius and all the applicabilities that it has pertaining to the markets, but we're going to go a little bit more with regards to current sentiment of the markets. We're going to be taking a look at the cryptos tonight, as well as the indexes. We're going to be taking a look at the cross correlation between both and really seeing what is going on across the board. Taking a look at what Excelsius is showing us, and more importantly, what could come about in the next coming weeks. And so with that, legends, first, just going to let everybody know, for those that are not aware, we are running a special, a limited time offer where if you purchase the yearly plan for any new or existing clients, you do get 3 months off, save $149.97 on us. Once again, when you purchase the yearly, you do get 3 months off. And so with that, legends, let's jump into today's live demo. So for those that have not been aware, the crypto market cap in its entirety has been falling quite steadily. We can definitely see here, just with regards to Excelsius, we've been recently declining ever since roughly about the end of the year towards the beginning of December. And since then, we have just seen a continued decline of this bearish sentiment at this current time. Now, what's super cool about Excelsius in and of itself, it's one of the features of Excelsius right now. I do have the rejection zones, market structure candles turned on. We are taking a look at the market structure in particular. What's really unique is the moment we do switch direction here, we do see a clear color change on that side, something really, really beautiful to see, and more importantly, makes trading in and of itself much easier on that side. And so right off the bat, we are seeing that Excelsius did tell us that we were going to start shifting out of some of this bullish momentum that we've been receiving for a long time. For those that have been aware, the crypto market entirely has been moving in one direction, and this has come to a cross correlation that we saw with the index market, and more importantly, just global side of things. So when we take a look at the longer time frame here, and we're just going to get rid of the rejection zones and market structure candles, I just want to merely show the structure in and of itself. We saw a huge push once we did dip at March of 2020. For those that weren't aware, equity market was absolutely tanking for a couple of weeks due to COVID-19. And when the Federal Reserve decided to come out and say that, they're going to do everything and anything that they can to keep the market alive, they very much did, unloading 40% plus of the circulating supply did do that, better known as stimulus. And so you want to be mindful that, the crypto market has appreciated as much as it has been solely because of the other variables that are involved. Whether you like it or not, the crypto space has adopted a global presence and very much will need that continued adopted global presence as we continue to become more of an adopted environment. Now, what's incredibly important to be mindful of across the board is that you will then see cross-correlated movements in context to the markets. If the S&P or the Dow, right, the NASDAQ, etc., if the markets start to turn a little bit, you will see the crypto space start to move in that same way. Even though the market in and of itself has moved quite drastically, and we drop back to the total market cap here in just a sec, the biggest thing that you need to be mindful of is that this has moved at an extremely aggressive rate. Ultimately, when it comes down to the crypto space right now, this is a very exciting time. A lot of the legends that have been with me since, we've been involved since about mid 2018 here, and we had to deal with a bit of this depreciating market here. But since then, we've seen nothing but continued adoption across the board, and that's been extremely exciting. For those that are not really as experienced in this, if there was any doubt of a complete turnaround, I would not be speaking in such an optimistic manner. But, being involved in the time period that we were, especially when you saw the first massive rally take place in the beginning of 2017 here, pushing into that 2018, and then kind of seeing how all of society viewed this pullback, this is really no difference. Yes, it's just at a much grander scale at this current time because, once again, the variables that are involved when it does come down to the crypto space. Now, the biggest thing when we take a look at right now is just why are things happening in the way that they are? Why is price retreating as aggressively as it is? One big factor, as we've been talking about, is just simply this extendedness that has happened, right? Due to stimulus, due to all the other variables involved. Secondly, more importantly, it's very much important that you're mindful of what are the components that really make up this last, significant movement. And the first thing that I'll tell you is that a lot of the money that does circulate pertaining to the crypto space, unfortunately, is immature money. And what I mean by that is that a lot of individuals who have happened to make money in this space, they're individuals that are not necessarily the most knowledgeable, or more importantly, they're not individuals that really have a longer term outlook on this. And because of that, that does reflect sentiment, no question, and will cause for the ripple effects that you do see, the waves that you do come across, right? When you're hearing, young individuals such as 12, 13, 14, 15, and so on are making tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars through cryptos, through NFTs and things like that, it's a positive, but yet a negative thing as well, just because that does become a reflection of the market and does make up for the size in which you do see. And so, I'm not saying that they happen to make up, the massive majority of it, but when you have an individual who's interested in a market space solely to make money, and with that, they're going to allocate their money into coins, let's say like Dogecoin and Shiba Inu, who don't necessarily have the most utility with them, that becomes problematic because, yes, while those market caps tend to rise quite aggressively, a lot of now the exchanges and other companies tend to focus a lot of their efforts on there. And when you hear Robinhood, for example, back in the day saying like, hey, if we don't increase our Dogecoin transactions, we could start experiencing, maybe some pullbacks on the cryptos or some changes in the way that we deliver products and all of that. That really speaks a lot, telling you that they're over levered on the coins that have absolutely no utility, and they're just really serving, a service that, right now the market is demanding, which is we want to get involved. We want to try to make aggressive money quickly and then get out. That will be a reflection of the sentiment, no question. And so when you fundamentally understand that, makes preparation for this a lot easier. Listen, like I said before, I've been a part of corrections that have been down 70, 80, 90%, just because market at this current moment, and correct me if I'm wrong, is down 50% from the highs, 45, give or take. It's understandable. It's important more so than ever to be mindful of what as well causes those things. As we've talked about before, the entire index market is going to be a huge, huge basis of that. You can definitely see that this in and of itself was such an aggressive movement, and so was this, no question about it. And at some point, all of it has to reflect. I can't express that enough. Now, what's incredibly cool is Excelsius makes looking at all of this very, very simple, very easy, just very straightforward. Aside from just being kick-ass in the context that it, identifies structure and just overall market sentiment in the way that it is, it really does allow for an individual to completely mix and match their goals totally based on what they're trying to achieve. And especially, let's say, for example, like the crypto space right now and the index space, which tend to be more of the hotter, aggressive markets that we're currently in, Excelsius is really perfect in instances like this because you can really now start to take advantage of these opportunities versus maybe you didn't have Excelsius and now you don't necessarily have the confidence that you would require to go ahead and say, hey, you know what, volatility's up. Let me see if I could drop into the smaller timeframes and really compete in that fashion. Let me see if I can maybe get some better built positions on those longer timeframes using Excelsius tool line. And so that is really some big things that we really want to take a look at tonight and really see how Excelsius can apply, especially in instances like this, where market environments, are extremely lucrative. Now, be mindful, legends, once again, if you ever have any questions, don't ever hesitate to reach out in the chat room, right? This is what I'm here for, always here to help out. And so, yeah, we're going to take a look at both markets. We're going to take a look at the index market in particular. We're going to take a look at the crypto market as well, and just look at different ways that you can go about building opportunities in this in just all different fashions. Now, we're not going to really be using all the tool lines here right now with Excelsius because it's not necessary. We're going to really be focusing on the market structure side of things because that is, of course, what dictates directions. taking a look at the rejection zones as well, more of the intraday standpoint to really see if we can get any type of deceleration and exhaustion. But with regards to the volume profile, we can definitely take a look at that as well, just see where all the orders sit. Fibs won't necessarily be as important to us. Dashboard always stays on, just giving us indications of what's going on from an overall standpoint. I can't express enough, legends. Excelsius tool line is absolutely out of this world. This is just one segment of it. You got the alerts, you got the Discord server. It is an entire beast that genuinely takes things to a whole new level. Crazy. Jumping into it, we're going to start with the market structure here. We'll take a look at the indexes and then move into the crypto side of things. What we can see from the index side, and we're going to start with US 30, which tends to represent the majority of the initial movements that take place. No question that we can definitely see that price is decelerating without a doubt after such an aggressive movement, clearing that high, which is where that entire drop had taken place. Now, just be mindful though, deceleration is not always indicative of a switch within momentum, right? You want to break down key points. You want to start changing the overall bias of how people view things. That's how you start to see overall changes within structure. Am I saying that we can't expect some type of movement that actually would return back into these previous levels? Absolutely not. That definitely could happen. That is a possibility in the end of the day. But am I not also saying that this could also just simply bounce back as we've seen on these prior movements when we do start to dip down and we could just simply see a continued movement? It's always possible as well, right? We're traders. We're not investors in this in context to being biased on one side. We're being mindful of what can happen, and we're really making sure that we're allocating appropriately. I find it interesting how when people call themselves investors, yet they'll continue to look for price points to continue average in and try to continue to move with the dynamics of the market. In my eyes, whether you're an investor, a trader, or both, you're always doing some sort of trading on that side. And so you want to be mindful of both possibilities and being able to plan with what you're going to do, whether you trade this movement or you look to buy these, shorter term dips. Excelsius, no less, though, is definitely showing us that we're receiving some deceleration and exhaustion. More so, though, it makes sense because of these key levels that we're pushing into here. We can definitely just see the way that price is reacting right now, just a super, super wicky environment. But before we start dropping down into the daily, we really want to take a look at just these higher timeframes here and see what are those key points that potentially price could start looking back into. Excelsius is definitely telling us right here that price could return back into this 29.5 area, right? Midway through. And this is, once again, you look at the date, this is right before that whole stimulus decided to come in here. And that really is where you might see price just start to correct back down into. That is a ultimate possibility if we do see that, and then we would expect further continued movements. We can definitely see here, though, and this is truthfully a big one, but it is possible. Once again, you want to be mindful that you're never going to see any type of drastic shifts out of this correction or just this entire movement until you completely got rid of that initial low that was created on March 2020. Really is where you can see a lot of the respect taking place. Shout out to Excelsius for identifying that like it's no one's business. It's crazy. Can't get over it. Yeah, at the same time, just because you start to break down this structure, you start to break down any of these key points, getting back above this previous high and so forth, this once again is all intraday plays. These are all intraday movements. I can't stress enough, and I've said this time and time again, this movement is something that was never planned or expected. This is something that ultimately just happened to have as an anomaly, right? Never really expected to take place. I don't think anyone in their right mind thought that we were going to hit a pandemic in the way that we did, or at least at the time in which that we did. And so, yeah, once again, the actions that took place are just very drastic actions, and there's a possibility for correction. Now, when looking at it from a longer time frame, once again, unless we really break these significant handles here, we're not really looking for any type of major shift out of direction. You're looking for continued movements to the upside. These are just short-term corrections, but nonetheless, they could definitely last for a bit of time. Now, what we want to be mindful, though, of is that, okay, even though that these are the longer viewpoints, if price does start to correct solely because this was such an exasperated movement and potentially, was never needed. By the way, I did call that when it did happen. I said, if this does ever correct, which it should at some point, because 40% of the circulating supply should be reflected in the overall market, price will just simply return back to pre-COVID levels. And from there, you could expect business to continue as usual. But the media will portray it as a crash or some type of crazy movement. But all it did was just simply, get rid of the, once again, anomaly that was never really planned on taking place, which caused for such aggressive actions. But be mindful, timing's important too. And so it really comes down to the components of, what takes place. Still very early in the year, so who knows what is possible. Now, when we drop, like I said, into the smaller timeframes here, we're going to be taking a look at more potential upsides here, because even though we start breaking down some of these key points, which once again, Excelsius just identifying to a whole new level, absolutely wild in the system. All of this is once again short-term corrections, short-term pullbacks, because we are stating unless we got rid of this pre-March 2020 movement, you're still looking for those continued movements, and that's really what we're looking to see here. You take a look from Excelsius turning on market structure candles, you can see everything remains bullish unless we really start changing some of this intraday structure on that monthly. Until we start breaking down these lows, everything is still continued along to the upside. When we drop to the daily, however, though, things do start to change here, and that is something that you really want to take a look at. We are getting through some pretty significant points at this current time, and that is something that may start to cause a lot of this deceleration to end and really potentially continued movements of this correction. Now, like I said, the bias at this current moment, it's really indecisive because, from what structure shows us, and we trade what we see, not what we think, structure shows us that for the long-term view, we're still looking for that bull to the upside, right? No question. From the short-term standpoint, though, there is a possibility for a correction, and it makes sense with the variables that are involved, right? Having such aggressive actions take place, from post-COVID, and at the same time, just looking at the current environment, we do need some correction, but it's not to say that it's granted. And so when we do take a look, though, from this whole intraday standpoint, what we can see here is that price now is successfully getting through some of these key levels in here. Now, we do have a good amount, and that's what we definitely saw on the weekly as well here. And there's no question about it. You take a look at this entire environment, this is definitely guarded. No question about it. I'm sure if we pop on, the institutional volume here, we'll see some type of orders definitely sitting, and we can definitely see here. And once again, for those that don't know how to use an institutional volume profile, simply the bigger the bars, the more orders you can expect as we break through these key points. They simply work like support and resistance. You can expect price to continue, right? Simply just indicates, though, where you can expect some massive deceleration and exhaustion taking place. And we can definitely just see here that there is a massive amount of sensitivity that does take place in here. And so that's, once again, there goes my mouse. Apologies about that. So once again, in the end of the day, when we do take a look at things from an intraday standpoint, even though we could potentially expect some further continued bearish momentum, it is for the short term. And so with that does come the level of movement that could take place. Even though we did just recently pull back after such an aggressive movement today, that's not to say that we can't continue this movement to try to fill this point and start really attacking some of these lower points. And so when we're taking a look at this, what does this mean for the other side, right? The crypto side, you could potentially expect further depreciation on the crypto side of things. Once again, though, by no means does that completely change the stance of how we view the market in the long term. For someone who, has been a part of 70, 80, 90% corrections and really been a part of probably the more of a speculative time period, right? After such an initial big run, 2017, I cannot stress enough, the adoption is here. No question about that. The adoption is here. And more importantly, the acceptance is here, So when you look at the development that is taking place across the board, it's absolutely astonishing. But that does not mean for the short term, you will not receive corrections. Excelsius in and of it all, though, for the moment is definitely going straight in line with what we're seeing from a pure price action standpoint, looking for those short-term corrections on the intraday standpoint, but still very much adamant about the longs for now. We'd have to completely erase the entire bullish movement that took place initially, post March 2020, and that's asking for a lot. You'll see this very reciprocal across the board in any of the other indexes that you look at, solely because they all did move in a very cyclical fashion when it came down to the movements that have taken place post 2020. And that makes sense solely because of the fact that markets in and of itself all kind of banded together when this all happened, hence being a global pandemic. And so global actions were taking place on that side. very much the biases stay the same. Short-term corrections, potential, long-term continued movement still. It's what we're looking at for right now. Really what's important to take place, which I think is going to be even more of the aggressive side, is the crypto space here. This solely comes back down into what I was saying in the beginning of the call, and really kind of looking back now at the cross correlation here. This is an exciting time for everybody involved. I know that a bunch of the legends that have been, part of, the Excelsius team and just the DataFX trader team and just the entire community across the board have been involved, pre-2019. And so seeing where the crypto space has gotten to since, we've all started to compete in it, it's quite exciting. And I think no one can contest the adoption that is taking place. But once again, and as we've talked about here before, on this longer time frame aspect, we can very much see here that this is an extremely aggressive movement that has taken place. No question about it. And more importantly, not just the level of aggression that is taking place, but you have to look at the variables that are associated that really caused such a movement. And, as mentioned before, when you do start to look at the components, and the components are that individuals are not, at least the majority of individuals are not really mindful of what the real utility is that they're investing in, and more interested in the potential monetary gain, that becomes a reflection of sentiment. No question about it. Secondly, more importantly, when you look at the level of experience, and not to say that the young legends in this whole game, they can't be astonishing individuals. They do reflect a level of the sentiment when you hear 13, 14, 15-year-olds, making tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. As said before, that reflects the market, no question about it. And so when you do see such massive fluctuations take place, that's going to cause you to do something, potentially liquidate some, potentially liquidate all. And by doing so, you now become, part of the feed that causes for such a tidal wave without inherently realizing it. And this is, where really big money steps in and really showcases how good they are at the game, right? And this is what you have to respect in context to the big players that really do run the show. This is the whole basis of experience. Once again, by no means is me, or I think majority of people, saying that this is something to dissipate, but a correction is definitely possible, a massive one for sure. And that's something that for me, for example, I've personally been okay with, right? Here for the utility. That's the biggest thing. If you believe the utility will remain and continue to improve with time, it'll be reflected in the investment. Very simple. And so when we take a look at the crypto space, cross-correlated from the S&P side, Excelsius shows us very much the same thing. Market at this current time is still very much bullish on that larger scale, as it should be. Really, what would force this to start correcting is breaking through that point, which is right around when stimulus got posted. Sorry, 2020 is back here. Much more back. But, and apologies about that, but still, in the end of the day, very reciprocal to the base and development of what we see on S&P on the larger scale, right? Unless we completely got rid of all of this movement, you can simply expect the same things, corrections, but corrections that are aggressive, no question about it, right? 5, 10, 15, 20% movements in the market are without a doubt aggressive movements, but they are the nature of the market in which we are dealing with here, which is the crypto space. Now, this is something that's been talked about on Instagram, on the Reels for the last couple of days now. Super cool to see Excelsius play out as quickly as it did in context too. We talked about Excelsius calling Bitcoin crashing before it happened as it did. And we did just recently post a video yesterday about Excelsius giving indications of a potential shift out of BTC, which we're seeing right now in the short term. This is really the whole basis of Excelsius. Excelsius is designed to really give you that advantage that you would otherwise require, and the tools you would need to get from an institution. Excelsius is here to really take trading and simplify it for you to a whole new level while really giving you that confidence to take your trading to new heights. I can't express that enough, and you'll hear me repeat it time and time again. It's solely focused on the most important components of the market, what drives markets, what dictates directions, shifts, continuations, as well as giving you that full tool line for executional sides. I can't express that enough. Let's take a look at why we were taking a look at Excelsius for Bitcoin sells when we were near this 43, 44K handle, and why we're targeting the areas that we are and how we're using Excelsius to help out with that. Let's take off market structure candles here for a second, just really focusing on some of these key points here. When you really look at the mid of November, this is really when we first started to shift out of this ascending structure that was attempting to rebound. Now, the biggest thing, what we've seen here since, is that we definitely saw an exasperated movement straight down to these previous handles here as expected. And all we've seen is further decline of this crypto space, of this Bitcoin market. We started talking about a continued movement here solely because of the significant area that we're sitting within. Look at the level of structure that has taken place. You can just see the level of respect that we've seen price hold. And so Excelsius giving us indications that, hey, when you take a look at the market structure, when you tag on the market structure candles here, there's no need to ever think that this here is bullish momentum, because Excelsius would tell you if it was, candle color would change. And that would happen by breaking through a point of market structure. And so with that, the moment that we've corrected out of here, Excelsius telling us, hey, we get these short-term corrections, just understand that's exactly what they are. And you can expect those continued movements. And so when we're sitting right here, loading up, pulling into a previous low here, on top of pulling through some major points, price can attempt to make an attempt to break through. And that's exactly what happened. It's exactly what happened. Now, last night, we posted a video. We're talking about potential pullbacks on this entire Bitcoin space here. Why are we saying that? When you put on all three, go down to the daily first and foremost, we're pushing into one of the first rejection zones. We can automatically see price starting to decelerate and exhaust. For those that don't know, the rejection zone of Excelsius are there to identify the tops and bottoms of any market on any time frame. Gives you indications of deceleration and exhaustion, slowdowns within price, great for potentially picking reversals, looking to build positions, looking to manage your positions. There's so many applications. And so automatically, looking at where price is pushing into, aside from looking at the area in which we're pushing into, on top of taking a look at the behavior that we've seen in these cyclical movements, definitely telling us that, hey, could expect the same thing. And that seems to be what's happening right now. We're taking a look, dropping down to the 2-hour time frame here. We can see, and let's take a moment here and appreciate how incredible Excelsius held this inside the rejection zone, caused that push out. Incredible. We can see here very much the same concept, that we might start to get a correction, not just because we're pushed into the rejection zone, but take a look at what happened within structure here. Start to pull back and notice how price successfully started to correct out. We did start to break through the lows here, but pressure didn't really withhold, still sitting within this rejection zone here. And we can start to see now price starting to really start to pull back. Higher time frames never really got through any of these lows. And we're really starting to see now price starting moving back to that 38K, 39K handle. We knew these are some expected targets when you start dropping down into the 1-hour time frame here. And you can take a look after breaking through some of this. We're saying to ourselves, hey, where can we expect next? We really start to go through. First area is really sitting within that 39.5 area, as well as that 38K region. And so utilizing Excelsius to really give us straight indications of where price can go. Simple plug and play. And now we can see price just recently corrected through a major point, and we're expecting this continued movement, pushing into that 38K, 39K region of the rejection zone. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. However, this doesn't go back into what we were talking about before, which is we're still expecting further continued bearish momentum for this market at this current time. Short term, however, because of the variables talked about, index market across the board looks incredibly bullish for the long term. Short term, though, decelerated, exhausted, could see that correction. And BTC, very much reciprocal on that side. And this is the great thing, because when you know that you have such markets that are really as aggressive as they are, that means opportunity. That means possibility. And that's what's so cool. I'm going to show you guys how you can really take advantage, really venture out, increase your level of confidence to a whole new level with Excelsius, especially in times like these. Take a look at this. We're just using 3 tools of Excelsius. We don't need to turn on anything else. We're going to really first understand the sentiment of what's going on and potentially take a look at how we can build positions. How we can really start to drop down and see what we could do here. So first, as we talked about before, we know that the crypto space in the longer term is still very much bullish, no question about it. But in the shorter term, we are definitely expecting further continued bearish momentum. The question is when, and that's what we want to be mindful of. Could it happen at any time? Sure, but we want to be mindful of the game plans of what's going to allow for that to happen. We know that a possibility to pull back is possible, just like we've seen in the past here. And so we're going to plan for that and potentially look to trade that. We also know that continued movements can very much take place. There's really not much stopping where we're currently sitting at. There's absolutely nothing in its way for price to drop down to this 30K region. And so once we understand that, it's a matter of just simply assessing from a higher time frame down into the lower potential opportunities. We can trade the correction short term. We can look for the continued bearish plays. You can even look to start building positions once we start pushing into such key and sensitive areas. The possibilities are genuinely endless. Let's go through a couple of them. So as mentioned before, we know that market here, it's bearish. We know that there's 2 possibilities: continue down, drive this short-term correction up, and continue down. And we also know that for any type of real shift, we got to get above this 44K handle. It's very easy. So we know 44K or there's no real major shift. We start dropping into the 4 here. We're going to take a look straight away that we know that price is breaking through some significant points. More importantly, still pulling off this rejection zone here, giving us indications that, hey, we could start to push into this 40K region if possible. If we do continue to extend, we could start to push out, maybe push into this 43 up into this 45K handle. We're going to be mindful, however, though, that this still is looking to happen. This still is looking to happen. As this continues to develop, the rejection zones will continue to follow, and be mindful that will come into its way as well. For the moment, we very much know that if we want continued bearish plays, we're going to have to crack this low and really push through this rejection zone, because as long as price stays within there, we can still very much expect that deceleration and exhaustion. Now dropping to the 1 here, just giving us a little bit more structure to work with here. We can definitely see here that there's a little bit more areas that we can start looking for potential opportunities. Now, from a intraday standpoint for the longs, we did just recently correct out, which means that price may look to continue its bullish momentum in the short term up into this 38, 39K region, which also coincides with the first aspect of this rejection zone. From this time frame alone, Celsius is telling us that we're not really looking for any of those massive term sells unless we really start cracking the lows, which I would tend to agree with, especially when you see such an aggressive movement that prices, move nearly 25%. You want to see continued pressure for any type of real continued grand movement. Otherwise, pulling back in here is most likely going to result in some type of consolidation or exhaustion and may continue to look for those longs. We crack these lows, it's a way different question. However, if someone wanted to trade and attempt for those short-term corrections inside that, you very much can. And that's the cool thing about Excelsius. You drop down to the 15 here, we're going to get a bunch of opportunities now. Not only from the buy, but from the sell as well, being mindful for these key elements. And we can very much see here, Excelsius already giving opportunities if you want to start taking these short-term corrections. And will continue to develop as price continues to develop, continue to create new points for you. Breaking through some of these key points may allow for some of this relief to actually continue back down. And you may start to get back into this previous lower regions. That's what's so incredible about Excelsius. You can completely adapt and build game plans, all based on what your goal is at the given time. It genuinely simplifies the process in ways that cannot be explained. And we're only using 3 elements of the entire tool line. Still being mindful of our foundation, of the knowledge that's required of market sentiment. As we've always talked about, we want the market to work for us, just like we want Excelsius to work for us. Excelsius is not in the driver's seat. We are in the driver's seat, using Excelsius's tools to really take our trading to a whole new level. And so when we take a look at it all, the possibilities are there. When you attempt to start getting into more of these intraday environments on Excelsius, this is really when you want to start dropping into the higher time frames, not dropping, but rising into the higher time frames, so that you can get more clear areas, clear environments and context to what's going on. Just because we're pushing into a 15-minute rejection zone does not mean that price is just going to reject off of this region. We still have to be mindful of what's going on in the higher time frame, because higher time frame dictates direction, dictates it all. Smaller time frame follows. And so, once again, opportunities and the possibilities are genuinely endless, all based on what the goal is. Whether you want to attempt to continue to trade this short-term correction to the upside, which you're still looking for the sells, whether you want to attempt to start breaking down some of this bearish momentum, but is not indicative of a complete shift until you got through the actual low itself. Whether you want to start looking for potential rejection plays on either side, you very much can, and build a position through there. The combinations and possibilities are unreal. And that's what's so exciting, because when you have times like these, where market is so aggressive, this is stuff you want to be involved in. These are times that you really want to test your level of trading and see, wow, how much can I really move with how market's moving? Of course, not just going out there and just firing trades away at any cost, having a solid game plan with criteria, calculating everything out, but getting that additional confidence with Excelsius is the way that you want to move. It's the way that I've been moving. I can't express enough how incredible it's been. And same thing goes for the index side of things, right? When you take a look at the cross-correlated environment, you can very much look at that in the same way. When you drop to the daily, same bias stands like we talked about with the crypto side. We know in the bigger term, we're still looking for this long for the moment. However, we can see that in the short term, we've just corrected through some major points here. And so we know that this is going to happen. We expect this to continue to happen. And the only way this becomes invalid is if we really start correcting through the highs once again. And so it's about understanding where these movements take place in the shorter and in the longer term, and creating the plans associated, using Excelsius's tools to take your trading and to really give you that additional edge that we all seek. So we know that both short-term buys and continued short-term sells, because the picture in the bigger term is still long, can take place. Let's plan for those. We know on the daily, we just pushed through some serious area, and we're really starting to wick off. Now, there isn't much structure to work with here on the higher time frames, on the 4 hour, let's say for now, and that makes sense because of such an impulsive and aggressive movement. We'll start to drop down into the 2, into the 1, and really see if we do get some more shorter term plays. Potentially not still, may still start to get a little bit more points. There are no current points that are going to be identified here in this initial impulse, just because once again, you'd want to drop down to the smaller time frames to see any type of correction, especially after you see where you're pinning off of from the daily time frame and such sensitive points, and even on the weekly here as well. And this is why you have to be so mindful of what's going on in that bigger picture. That's why there's no points on the higher time frame being talked about, because there's nothing to talk about in context to looking for these continued sells inside. You would have to break a serious point. When you start dropping down, you can look for some possibilities, but still, you're going to really want to drop even lower because of how short-term it'll be in context to the sensitivity of the environment you're moving into. Now in the 2, and we'll start to drop into the 1 and 30, you very much get same concepts. You push into the rejection zone here. You can start to build a position, put stops below, target first point, look to rebuild as you continue to break through. Look to take down this sell. If you start to break down some past market structure, be mindful. You got to be really careful with your position because of pushing into a rejection zone in context to a weekly and daily sensitive point, higher lows, big points of market structure. Notice how I'm simply mixing and matching everything together to really take my confluences to whole new levels. Nothing leads one more than the other. It's about understanding the probability and assessing the statistics in which of the environment you're in. Now, we want to be mindful, once again, these buys are very much short term because of the previous movement that's taking place. And as mentioned before on the daily, unless we're breaking through the high, we're not really looking for any type of serious changes. Now, if we really want to start, though, looking to break down some of this bullish momentum, this is when we really start dropping down. Still don't think any points are going to be referenced here. No, but we start dropping down to the 15, let's say, and they'll definitely start giving you some more opportunities that you can start to expect if you want to start taking those sells. Still not just because of how aggressive a movement it was. What a serious play it was. Whoops. I'm going to take off the market structure candles here for a second. It was just like one candle. Yeah, it's just like one candle. Okay. So that's the reason why there's no structure there. It's just a straight impulse in the end of the day. So, I mean, for the moment, and if anything, Excelsius is simply trying to tell you, unless you want to be wildly aggressive on taking such intraday plays here, which you would have to come all the way down for, you best to be waiting for this to really leg out. And that is really the biggest confidence that you should have in this, because without even looking at it, it's like, that makes sense. Why would I be selling in such a wild environment? Look at the way price just reacted and look at where we are. When we drop to the weekly, same context. Look at the way price is reacting and look where we are. Extreme levels of sensitivity. That's not to say that we can't leg back and then expect the sell, but the incredible and super cool thing to take note of with Excelsius, Excelsius is not showing any market structure in here because the movement in and of itself is just one candle. It's just an impulse. You have to drop all the way down to such a lower time frame to really look for any type of selling opportunities. That's what's so legendary about this system, is its dynamicness and ability to not sway and break down. It's about utilizing your foundation that you have and allowing Excelsius to take that foundation to new heights. And so when we take a look at both markets across the board, extremely opportunistic environments, no question. And during such opportunistic environments, you want to have game plans to take advantage of, get involved, maximize that there are more trades available, because that's a trader's dream, an investor's dream, an overall market participant's dream, to be able to build and continue along their positions. I can't express enough in words how exciting it is to now know that you can have different game plans, all based on what's going on in context to environments, as simple as plugging and playing, truthfully. This, of course, though, comes with a tremendous amount of back testing that you want to incorporate. And I will be the first one to tell you that. Anybody who does get signed up with Excelsius and does really start to get involved, the first thing that we talk about is back testing to a whole new level. Because you can't experience the true advantage of your own trading without seeing a tremendous amount of results. And you don't need those results to be dictated by the live market that comes with emotional tolerance. It's just not necessary. But once you do test enough, you start to see the same thing that everyone else sees. You've had it inside you all along, that ability to really trade and push in that way. It's just a matter of having the right tools. And in environments such as the financial game, where when you start, think about it, you're competing against people that have way better tools than you. It's just not fair. It's just not fair. Being a retail trader, this is what we strive for. And so I can't express enough how sick it is. You see the S&P crashing 1,000+ points, see crypto market dropping 25+%. And instead of thinking to yourself, oh, is this the right time to be getting involved, to be competing? Create the plans. And let Excelsius help you continue those plans on. That's what it's all about. And so, super excited to see how this all pans out. I'm really excited to see how Excelsius continues to adapt in these new environments. A lot of questions we get all the time is, oh, how is Excelsius in aggressive environments? You see exactly this. Straight business, always. Always in context with market structure. I think this S&P example has got to be one of the sickest examples you're taking a look at how market is like pinning on daily points and is not telling you by any means from the 4-hour all the way down until you get to the 5. It's saying don't trade sells. Market is at a super critical point. Amazing. And then it makes you think, makes sense. Let's let it develop a little bit more. Maybe get some higher time frame structure. Then start looking for the sell setup. Or hey, wait for some past points to break. Let's get through that rejection zone. Let's get through some higher highs here. Maybe look for continued bullish movements. As mentioned before, the possibilities are genuinely endless. And so, yeah, legends. That's going to conclude this week's Excelsius live demo. Awesome examples. I can't express that enough. Every week, we're doing these at 6 p.m. EST, talking about different topics, the applicability of Excelsius, different markets, and just overall ways that you can take your trading to new heights. As always, if you have ever any questions, don't ever hesitate to reach out. Be mindful, once again, we are running the limited time offer where if you do purchase the yearly, you do get 3 months free. $149.97 off. Don't miss out. We rarely run specials. It's available for any new and existing clients. We're not going to run many specials this year. If it's something you want to take advantage of, I highly recommend you doing it. Thank you all for showing up tonight. Continue to keep flying, keep rocking, keep shining. As always, if you need anything, don't ever hesitate to reach out. Speak to you all in the next live demo. Go experience the advantage. Don't forget about the special.